No, yeah, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I moved to D.C. to work for the United States Congress and started at this little tiny church plant. And the way God does in our interesting stories pulled me into ministry, and I've had the joy of serving there for a couple of decades now. But we have a little bit of a unique story because we maybe do some things backwards. We were on the front end of multi-site ministry, launching churches and portable spaces and kind of reaching the DC metro area in that way. And there's a lot I could say about that, and if you're doing work in the multi-site or the portable space, I'd love to talk with you at some point about some of those strategies. But God shifted things on us a few years ago, and we actually consolidated our locations, and there were a number of variables at play in that, and COVID was one of them too, into two larger locations. And so we actually had to learn, and for many years I would say Orange probably reached out working with us because we had a unique perspective of we had maybe larger church resources, but each individual location were in rented environments, and each individual location operated like a small church. And so we kind of saw some things both ways, but we consolidated those locations and launched some out into their own individual churches. That's a whole story in and of itself, but into two larger locations and one online. And in the process of that happening in our family ministry, what we started to notice for the first time, having this incredible physical building and space, and the families were coming in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you can imagine it's a place of a lot of young professionals and a lot of incredible things happening. But because education is what it is and other things are what they are, many families leave the city when their families begin to age. And so not many are building things with families in mind. And so here we were building this incredible thing, and it's particularly in urban areas. Do we have who's in the room that pastors in an urban area? Anyone? Raise your hands high. So some unique challenges, spaces there as well. Well, what we found is that as parents began to come, there was even a greater sense of what I would call a consumer mentality, right? Those that were coming to receive something on a Sunday morning. Families were like, oh, this is exciting, dipping in on a Sunday morning, and then they weren't engaging with us throughout the week. So we have really wrestled with how do you increase parent engagement and volunteer engagement. So I'm just gonna give you a few handles today, a few things to think about and maybe try in your spaces. First thing I would say is that culture counts. And I learned this firsthand myself, the right way, or my firsthand with my son. My son started his freshman year this last year, and through a variety of circumstances, we've had them in public school in the DC area, and you can imagine what a lonely journey as a person of faith that was like. And my older daughter had a very difficult experience, and so we decided to put him into this. He applied for this really incredible, very prestigious kind of school opportunity. And last year, when my husband and I started attending some of their, parent events and some of the things that they had going on, all of a sudden, we just were like, oh my goodness, we were hooked. They were drawing us with these stories they were saying these things like, you were gonna hand us your boys and we were gonna give you back men. And I'm like crying, could they really do it? We wanna partner with you. They're painting a picture, they're telling stories about how this is going to work, and they're telling stories about how they're gonna walk with us for a season and a journey. And I look at my husband and I'm like, I have drank the Kool-Aid, like we are in. And our family ministry team wants to hear nothing about this because when I come back, for weeks, I was going on and on about how they convinced me we have to get better at our parent culture, parent engagement culture. They convinced me that they are going to partner with me in all the things that I'm worried about with my son. So we started to really wrestle as a church with, do we have a culture that competes? And I know a lot of us are talking about all these other things that compete for time with our kids. There's sports. Travel teams now are all Sundays. There's no, respect for church time. There's all these other things that compete for the time of our families. And we have to ask, have we created a culture that competes, that convinces parents, hey, we want to partner with you in all the things that you're worried about? And one way that we do that is by harnessing milestones. So my oldest daughter she's starting college this fall. We're not going to talk much about that because I didn't bring Kleenex up here with me. But I'll tell you, in this season, I am leaned in. I'm asking all the things about how do you equip a young adult of faith? What does it look like for her to be outside of our home? I'm asking developmental questions. I'm just leaned in a different way. And this has been the case at every milestone along the way, right? When my kids first started school, or when one of them made a decision for baptism. There are moments, these milestone moments, when parents are going to be leaned in a different way. And we as a church have to harness those opportunities and take advantage of what that would look like. And so that looks, there's a lot of different tools and resources to do that. We have to convince them as parents, we're going to partner with you through the stages. So one thing that we did was create, years ago, we created this event. It was for parents of the youngest kids, babies, toddlers, because at that stage, they're asking all sorts of questions about how to be intentional about faith in the home. So we wanted to partner with them and what that looks like. And at that event, and give them the tools and the resources that a few years down the line, they're asking different questions. They aren't asking that anymore. But we present this discipleship pathway, discipleship map that shows them as your child grows through the ages and stages, here's all the different ways that we're going to partner with you. And we want you to lean in on these specific things. And we paint a picture for what some of those most important things look like the Faith Foundations class that we have, or like the spiritual legacy pathway we have when you decide to dedicate. Those are ways that you can really harness those important milestones. So as your family ministry team, are you as a church thinking about what are the times and the moments that parents are leaned in and listening in a different way and hungry, maybe even to invite others along? With that, I would say, are we meeting the real need? And what that means is, are we providing the things that parents are really worrying about? You want to know what one of those things is? Technology safety. If your church isn't having some sort of conversation about technology safety, that's what moms and dads are up late at night worrying about and thinking about, and how do I make good decisions? Some churches will do a driver's license class or something like that. How do we prepare what it looks like to have safety on the road and what being healthy in that place? That's not something we cover much in DC because our kids are actually late to the driver's license thing. They have a Metro, so they find other ways. Mental health. Parents are asking about anxiety in young people. Are you having those conversations? Conversations about how to find faith in college as students are about to leave home. So just be asking the question, what is the real need? What are the questions parents are asking? One of our prayers as a church is, could we be the place that the community turns when they're looking for tools and resources and asking the hard questions about parenting? And then finally, Carrie said this earlier in such a beautiful way, that we have to give families community. We have to give them each other. That's one of the gifts that we give them. And the tension here is sometimes we get concerned that our calendars are too full and parents have so much going on and all we do as a church is add stuff to their calendars. That is true. But I do think the gift of community that we give them is important. So that just means to be critical thinkers about what are the things that are on our calendars. And are they things that are helping them build connections and communities with each other? We have you can imagine this is a challenging DC because turnover is so high. People move to DC for a season and move away. And so parent engagement and volunteer engagement is something we have to be thinking about all the time because there's so much transition in and out of our church and our community. But we have been blessed to have a group that has raised our kids together on the Hill, and as it's quite a lonely faith journey for some of these kids. They all attend different schools because of the way lottery system works education-wise in DC, but they are each other's safe place. And I pray and I try to strategize for how to give that to others. So volunteer engagement, so my undergrad studies were in economics and business, and there's this phrase called Tanstaffel. Does anyone know what this means in the room? Is anyone familiar with this economic Tanstaffel? No one? Okay, it means there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And it's a phrase that speaks to scarcity It speaks to the fact that no one actually does anything for free. And I would pose that with volunteers, that no one actually volunteers expecting nothing in return, right? People do want to get paid, they're just not paid monetarily. So you really do have to ask the question, and it might be different in your church than it is in mine or in one ministry or another, is what are the ways that we invest in and what do we give back to these volunteers? And I'd say quite often people will step into volunteering in the first place for altruistic reasons, but that usually won't keep them involved. They stay connected, and the leaders and volunteers that we have that have gone the distance with us, it's because they found their best friends there. Maybe it's that they have access to leadership. Maybe that they feel celebrated and seen, and they're able to use gifts that they don't use in their workplace. So asking those critical questions, what are the ways that we give back to our volunteers? And then I would encourage you to ensure easy exit and entry points. Sometimes people are hesitant to step up to engage in serving at your church because they think I'm going to be stuck here or committed in this spot forever. So we actually operate a semester system in our small groups and in our ministries, where those that step into lead, it's on a semester system, and there are seasons for stepping in and out of ministry. And then finally, I would go back to where I started, that culture counts. People want to be a part of something vibrant that grows. And I would say for those of you that are on platform and that are teaching regularly, find ways to tell the stories of what's happening in your ministry. Celebrate what you want to see more of. Celebrate if you have strong volunteer cultures. Give opportunity for those volunteers to share. And believe me, I know I'm in the same situation that you are, where everyone thinks the only answer to anything happens from the platform. And that is not true. There are many ways that you build culture in a team, but you do have the opportunity to work stories into your messaging. And so when I know of incredible things happening or stories of volunteers that need to be celebrated, we look for ways to do that. So so volunteer, those are some hopefully some tips and some tools for how to engage volunteers and parents.